But without further ado, let me introduce you to Jim Mahoney.
One of the things that I think is really astonishing about art itself is that it has power beyond any words that we can use to describe it, pretty much. If you all haven't been out there to see these paintings, they're experiences. I mean, yeah, art's a visual experience, but you'll see what kind of experiences await you if you haven't already. I'm going to begin with a quote, because basically what I'm going to talk about is, and I'm going out on a limb to do this, is to talk about what I think is the historical context for his work, which I think is a period that we're in which has fundamentally transcended postmodernity. In other words, about the beginning of the 90s or so, there were a lot of pieces floating around since Derrida died that postmodernism was dead, which a lot of people felt very comfortable about because it made us a bit less uptight and sort of rigidly orthodox insofar as we could find out what the orthodoxy was. But I thought I'd invented the word transmodern, but I hadn't. The word was invented I invented it in 1992, but let me get her name right, I always forget it, Rosa Maria Rodriguez Magda, who was actually published still in Spanish, a book called La Transmodernidad, but it's not in English yet. But she, again, wrote it, and the original copy was in '89. And so I've been sort of waving the flag of the transmodern for a while, because I really do feel, as she says, that essentially it's a sort of a Hegelian model, that the thesis was modernism, the antithesis was postmodernism, and the synthesis theoretically is the transmodern, but that doesn't give us any kind of concrete place to look at things at all, because there are no more isms anymore. That's sort of one of the features of the time now, and there haven't been isms for quite a while. One of the most inspiring quotes, though, and I'm going to jump into that immediately, is something that came out, I think, in the late 70s. Octavio Paz, who's written very well about art before, wrote a book called Children of the Mire, and in that book was this quote. He says, modern art has been criticism of the modern world and criticism of itself. But irony and analogy, the image and the bizarre, are only moments in the rotation of signs. The danger of the aesthetic of change are also its virtues. If everything changes, the aesthetic of change also changes. Artists of the dawning age look for the unalterable principle that is at the root of change. We wonder if the Odyssey and À la recherche du temps perdu, by Marcel Proust, have anything in common. This question, more than denying the avant-garde, is a question that extends beyond it. Now we ask, is there a point where the principle of change blends with that of permanence? I believe that what we're in is a situation in which I've noticed about three major characteristics of it, all of which appear in Anil's work. The first is the idea of liminality. Now what that is it's the idea that art's all about thresholds. Art's all about in-between spaces. It's a matter of going from one state into another, and that magical zone between states is its most energized state, and it's also its most ambiguous and ambivalent. I believe that our current, for many, many years now, contemporary art has been filled with mysterious answers to open-ended questions. And I believe this idea of the liminality, the idea of a permeable barrier between this world and the next world, is something that artists are quite free to play with and play in. Again, there's no one right way to make art. The other is this idea of the singular. I think all the time, every time we see something which is ultimately quite singular, something that grabs us, something that stops us. This is a strange thing to mention, but I have to, because I think it was a really wise thing that she said. My assistant, Hannah Sears, and I were talking about the issues of symbols, and she said, just off the top of her head, she says, symbols make you stupid. I said, what do you mean? Symbols make you stupid. Well, she qualified that, and she said something quite the opposite. Symbols stupefy. Something which has symbolic power stops you, absolutely prevents you from moving past it, because it's that strong. It interrupts, she said, when I asked her to qualify herself. She said, well, you know, people go about in the world and they want to eat, they want to drink, they want to copulate, they want to do whatever they do to live. And when you encounter a symbol, when you encounter a work of art that really works as a work of art, it stops you. And it interrupts that entire flow. Not that it's not natural, it's just something else. It's a message from another world. And this idea of singularity, I think is very, very powerful, especially in Anil's work, because every one of these pieces, especially the large pieces, when you encounter them, you're literally going to be entering a world. Each world is quite different. Anil and I spent a good deal of time looking at his paintings, and what was really astonishing was that in each picture, though there was this rectilinear format, it didn't matter. You still went into a very, very different metaphysical space if you meditated into it. And the third aspect is a little bit stranger, because I consider that the third transmodern aspect is that of the littoral. In other words, it's sort of like a beach. The culture is like a beach, and stuff washes up on it. And stuff has been washing up on the shores of 21st century culture from all sorts of places, times, situations, conditions, from men, from women, from gays, straights, aliens. And that's one of the things I think it's really persuasive and useful about the fact that we're able to stretch ourselves to accommodate so much otherness now, so much more than we ever did, and without very much explanation. The otherness, what washes up in Anil's work is the fact that the center of his work is a very pure Hindu practice, which he's going to talk about. I won't talk about it because he has a very beautiful way of describing it. But there's a Indian word, puja, which means prayer. And every one of these pieces appears to me to be a puja. In other words, it is a prayer that extends. It's something that you partake in. It's something he's already partook of, and it's something that the piece itself, in some very quiet but very powerful way, demands of you. The thing about it, sort of the sense of the new, and it's a scary term, because I mean, you think about you know, a milieu like Miami Basel Art Fair. People are always looking for the new there, but they're always looking for the new in terms of whatever kind of consciousness competition is going on. Sometimes what's new is actually very good. Sometimes what's new is actually very unusual, but pretty awful. It varies, and the idea of it being sort of a three-ring circus for rich people is you know, something which I think everybody accepts and to some extent embraces. However, the newness that you sense in work like Anil's is a newness that feels like the newness in which a person would have, let's say, walked into Betty Parsons' gallery and seen a Jackson Pollock on the wall in 1948. It's got that kind of newness to it. It's got an objective newness to it. So, insofar as we're looking at something which hopefully we've never seen before, I think what we're sort of what we sort of need to prepare ourselves for is a certain loss of self. I mean, a really objective loss of self. And you'll experience that coming up. I don't want to take too much of everybody else's time on stage, but one of Washington's finest artists, who's no longer with us, once said, Simon Gouvernaire once said, art is all about theology. And that's all they said, that's it. It's all art's ever about, which is a very doctrinaire thing to say. But I thought it was very lovely, and I know very well that he fundamentally believed it. And the other quote I'll leave you with is something that was above the meditation room in Meher Baba's retreat in South Carolina. An Indian guru who was here in the late 60s and early 70s, and Meher Baba said, and it was, again, it was, he didn't say it because he was mute for the last 23 years of his life. He said, that which is real is given and received in silence. Anyway, Thank you.